Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto was born with an Angal bloodline? Part 8. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this and comment for next part. And now let's start the fanfic. The man known as the War Dragon, Matsukani Slayer could currently be found walking throughout the corridors of his hideout with the newest addition to forces walking closely behind him, a little scared of his surroundings but the man's presence caused the fear to vanish. There was something about him that caused the little boy to simply let his fears go and walk with a large amount of confidence. The duo continued to walk until they reached a door with a symbol on it that resembled the one on Slayer's back. The man then opened the door to reveal a clean dojo with a 12-year-old boy meditating in the room. The boy had brown hair that reached his shoulders while wearing a black training gi with the arms ripped off to expose the well-built muscles he had for his age, along with a black armband tied around his right arm while his left arm was tied up with white tape. "Hello sensei, I came here early to meditate," the boy said as he picked his head up and opened his eyes, showing a deep crimson-red color that looked as if it could shine in pitch-black darkness. "Good Taiyo, you appear to be gaining more control over that special chakra of yours, but before we begin I want you to my next apprentice," Slayer said while pushing Naruto into the open, causing Taiyo to look towards the blonde child. His deep crimson eyes looked into Naruto's deep navy eyes and soon both boys began to get the feeling of hatred towards the other for some reason. They didn't know why, but they just had that type of feeling come over them, and unbeknownst to them, it would follow them for many years. Time skip. 2 years later. To many onlookers that stood on the side looking out in the distance, they could see a sight that many would describe as heaven's entrance. The sight was large mountain peaks appearing over thick clouds that blocked any and all sight that was below the mountain range. However, unbeknownst to those onlookers, they wouldn't be able to see what else was transpiring on this plain, as on one of the larger peaks stood a large temple that was built on the mountain top along. This temple held a cone-like appearance with many windows open around it, giving whoever was there the ability to see one of the main reasons why it was there. To that person, they would see 5 large peaks close together and looking almost like a hand of sort. But something else was currently underway within the temple, namely one huge circle that sat along the corner of the mountain top, thus showing that if you went over it then only the ground below will stop you. On top of that circle currently stood 2 boys could currently be found standing on it that overlooked several mountain tops as far as the eye could see. Behind the boys sat a large crowd of 300 people, each one looking at the scene before them with critical eyes, neither one siding with a favorite victor. Before the crowd stood one man that was known amongst the shinobi world as the War Dragon, Matsukani Slayer, who stood in between his students and the crowd in a calm fashion before clearing his throat, catching the attention of the 2 boys as well as the crowd. "Order of war, lend me your ears. We are all here, on top of this glorious structure, to see who is the most deserving of my title. Behind me stands my 2 students. Each one has proven that they are deserving of your following, your respect, and your loyalty, as well as proving that they would serve as a proud member of the Horsemen. The next generation has now begun with the recent naming of the legacies to the titles of Deaths, Famine, and Conquest, so it is with that reason and that reason only that we stand here to determine the final legacy," Slayer said with the men merely nodding, already knowing that they were already prepared to follow one of these boys, but they refused to pick a favorite, on to watch. Slayer then turned his sights onto his boys and saw that they still look at one another in the eye, something that was truly impression in his eyes. "Okay you two, now it's time for the fight to begin, but this will not be a usual fight, it will be a true fight to see who is to become my legacy to my title. Use everything you can to ensure your victory, but no jutsus are allowed. You must prove yourself with strength and skill alone, no additives. Now will each of you willingly sacrifice your place as my student to become my legacy?" Slayer asked as he looked onto his 2 students, who have each grown well over the 2 years that they've been training together, and though they did form some type of friendship, there was still some jealousy between the 2. "I accept the terms and will sacrifice my apprenticeship for your legacy." said Taiyo, now 14, standing at the height of 5 feet 8 with his muscles now looking more pronounced than they originally did. His hair was also longer than it was when he was 12, and while he still kept it in a ponytail, it was now braided and reached the middle of his back. Another thing that was different about him was the large tattoo that covered his right arm, which was an image of a black sun with a white kanji in the center for throne. He currently stood with a naginata in his right hand, spinning the weapon madly between his hands before slamming it down on the floor. A dark glare came over his eyes as he looked towards his fellow student under Slayer. I accept the terms and will sacrifice my apprenticeship for your legacy, said Naruto, now 8, also changed well over the years of his training with his height now registering at 5 feet 4, his hair now spikier with 8 bangs pointing upwards along his forehead and the rest of his hair tied in a ponytail, though to those that saw it would actually say that it looked to be either a wolf tail or a fox tail. He had a pronounced set of muscles for his age with his arms now holding 4 individual tattoos that looked to be seals of sorts. In his hands were a set of twin katana swords, though one was black with a kanji underneath that read, Amaterasu, and the other was silver with a kanji that said, Tsukiyomi. The boy then began to perform practice swings with his blades before suddenly stopping with both tips of his swords touching the floor, his eyes holding a dark glare as well. Slayer noticed the dark glares before they even aroused but did nothing to stop it, already knowing that while they hated the idea of having to fight for his legacy while sacrificing their place as his students, but they knew the rules and the customs of the horsemen. The title of the horseman must be earned, not given to prove that they would be receiver is indeed a true legacy, a ruling created by the original set and one that he knew well enough due to himself having to go through this with the previous war and so on. This would be one of the hardest challenges he ever had to place these two boys in, because now this wasn't spar to determine the strongest, it was a fight to determine who has the right to stay. With a deep heavy sigh he merely clapped his hands, thus signaling the beginning of the fight, something neither of the boys missed as they charged towards one another with Naruto nearing first and sending out the first attack. The blonde boy sent a quick slash with his right arm that was quickly blocked by Taiyo's staff before the preteen sent a quick spun in place to send a side slash towards Naruto's skull. The boy quickly ducked under the slash and quickly sent out a double slash towards the preteen midsection, and while he missed due to Taiyo's reaction time, the tips of his swords caught him and caused 2 small cuts to appear on his midsection. Ignoring the pain, Taiyo soon flipped the weapon in his hand to have the blade now facing upwards and forcefully bringing it back up, though he missed as well due to Naruto's reaction time, though he was nicked on his cheek by the edge of the blade. The blonde then back-flipped away from the preteen to give himself some ground to work with before bringing his right thumb up towards his cut and scratched the blood off, while Taiyo brought his thumb to his own side and wiped off the blood from his wound. The fight just started and they've already scored a hit on each other. Their reaction time and sixth sense must be within inches of each other. Fascinating. Slayer thought to himself before watching the boys charge right back at each other again. Naruto charged with his sword scratching the pavement, thus causing spikes to fly off the sword's tips before he jumped into the air holding both swords above head in an X shape before bring them down hard onto Taiyo, who merely held his staff and blocked the hit, though he felt the strength that the boy placed behind the strikes and nearly recoiled from the pain it brought to his hands. Yet he once more ignored the pain and quickly spun on the ground to send another slash towards Naruto's midsection, but before he could connect, the blonde vanished and reappeared beside Taiyo. The preteen cursed underneath his breath before sending an upward slash to block another strike from the dual sword-wielding blonde, who quickly dodged to the right before it had the chance to cut him again. Taiyo then reversed the blade to face downward while following the momentum he built by jumping in the air and sending another slash towards the 8-year-old, who, while surprised by the sudden move of his fellow student, didn't allow that to remain, as he dodged the slash and flipped his left sword into a reverse grip and sent a quick stab at the airborne preteen, who followed Naruto's original lead and vanished. He then stabbed the reverse-gripped sword into the ground before hopping into the air with his grip remaining firm on the handle, as Taiyo appeared behind him not a second later with a quick slash from the naginata that hit the sword with full impact, nearly disrupting Naruto's following attack. The blonde quickly regained his balance before sending out two boots aimed at Taiyo's head, which surprised him and paid for it once they connected. Seeing his opponent now stunned, he used the momentum built from the kick to push himself forward while slamming his feet on the ground while bending his knees. He then pulled his sword out of the ground in a normal grip before bolting himself off the ground and flew towards his opponent, who regained his composure and sent a quick slash with his naginata. The blonde then performed a barrel roll to dodge the slash and then sent out a dual-side slash, which caused Taiyo to curse to himself before suddenly bringing his weapon back to block the strike. While it worked in the matter of protecting him from death, the strength behind it was a different story as it forced him to skid along the ground, and before he could regain himself, Naruto was already back on the attack. The second the blonde's feet touched the floor, he charged towards Taiyo and sent two knees to the boy's chest, causing his feet to slip underneath him and land hard on his back. Then before he knew it, two swords were placed onto his jugular veins while his arms were held down by the boy's knees. It wasn't long until Taiyo heard the loud clap of Slayer that he realized the fight was over and that Naruto had won, thus ending his apprenticeship under Slayer after 6 years of training. Congratulations Naruto, you have now earned the right to call yourself the legacy to my title of war. Taiyo, I'm sorry but this is where we must end our journey together. Slayer said with Taiyo looking at the man in disbelief, while Naruto nodded his head before sliding his swords through his training gi's belt to secure them. The 12-year-old boy couldn't all that training underneath Slayer, constantly practicing to hone his skills to the level they needed to be, learning new jutsus by the tens on a daily basis, meditating to gain perfect control over his chakra, all gone to waste now. He didn't understand it. He was supposed to be the legacy, yet this blonde kid that just shows up out of nowhere and takes what's rightfully his. No way. But sensei, I've been training under you for the last 6 years, constantly trying to perfect the lessons you gave me, yet you let this no-named kid take my spot. Taiyo asked with Slayer sighing. You're correct Taiyo, it's not fair for me to do this to you, but you knew the terms of this fight and you accepted them in front of the order behind me. If I were to go and bend the rules for you, then I would be dishonoring all that the horsemen stand for, and I will not allow it to happen. You must continue your journey on your own now, I'm sorry. Slayer said before looking towards Naruto, who nodded again before walking towards his sensei, while Taiyo began to ball up with rage. His grip then tightened on his staff weapon before he looked towards the back of the 8-year-old blonde boy, malice and hate coming off his body in large waves. He then charged towards the boy while holding his weapon like a spear and aimed it for Naruto's back, intent on killing the boy here and now. He didn't get very far, as he saw the blade on his weapon suddenly fly off from the staff and then felt a large right hand smack him, thus causing him to be lifted off his feet and sail through the air before crashing down on the floor. He then groaned in pain, but before he could get up, he saw the form of Slayer standing over him with rage evident in his eyes. You are testing my patience, boy, and that is something you wish to do. Slayer said as Taiyo got up from the ground and glared at the man he once called sensei. Well, excuse for being pissed off, after all it's not every day that you are forced to leave your master of 6 years for a kid that's only been here for 2 years. Taiyo said with Slayer merely pointing towards the temple behind them, though the preteen knew what it meant. Leave my presence now while I'm still feeling the need to honor you for all your work. You still apparently have many things left to learn, but I will not be the one to teach you, now go. Slayer said with Taiyo snarling before nodding his head and then turning towards Naruto, who returned the same glare that the preteen showed. One day, you and I are going to fight again, and when we do, I'm going to stain the ground with your blood. Taiyo said right before bolting towards the end of the circle and jumping off, free falling towards the ground below. Slayer then sighed to himself before he turned to walk back towards his would-be successor, many thoughts going through his mind. Sadly, that day will happen and the end result will be death for one of them. End flashback. That was the thought that went through his mind as he ducked under another swipe and jumped away from his clone, panting heavily while his clone stood before him to await orders. It's still not there yet for some reason. I have to get stronger before I can see either one of them again. Naruto said with his clone smirking at his creator's strong-headedness when it came to his training and desire to stay the powerhouse that he was. Come on boss, let's take a break before we begin again. Kumori said with hopes of getting his master to listen to him. You have all night to train and you should let Kyuubi help you in your recovery. Taiyo took you through hell and back through that fight and even made you use that. That's quite the feat, huh? Kumori asked with Naruto shaking his head as he stood up tall still trying to catch his breath. All the more reason to keep going. Taiyo almost killed me and I had to use that in battle. I can't stop until I know where I need to be. Naruto said as he went back into his sword stance. I can't allow someone like him to nearly best me nor make me use it, because it could very well be the end of me next time. Naruto said to his clone, who merely shook his head. I know that boss, but if you don't stop to rest then you won't have to worry about someone else killing you because you'll be dead already. He said with Naruto staying in his stance and growling at the clone. I didn't make you to give me advice, I made you to be my best opponent. Now begin simulation number 23, level 15. Naruto said with the dark clone shaking his head before bringing up his fingers to form a cross seal and soon 10 clones appeared beside him. There was no use in stopping the blonde now, as he knew that the boy was right in his view about the battle. Taiyo came very close to killing him and he wasn't going to allow that to happen twice. As such the blonde immediately summoned him and from there on the two fought in a high-profile training simulation, with each setting changing by the minute. The current simulation that Naruto called for was one of the newer situations that he created, which was to have 3 opponents fight you at one time in sword battle, while 3 more fought with either taijutsu or simple weaponry, with the remaining 4 fighting in long distance using jutsus. While to most, this could be viewed as going too far into one's training, but in the blonde teen's eyes it was something that had to be worked on regardless of whether the situation comes or not. It was also Naruto's way of advancing his skills in certain areas of combat as well as assisting him in his sixth sense and reaction time. This level of simulation though was the hardest one of all of them, because that not only meant no holding back but to also make the situation as if he was in a war and stood as the last warrior trying to take as many enemies with him before dying. This only meant that the blonde was far more serious in this than he originally thought. Okay then boss, let us begin shall we? Kumori said as he snapped his fingers and soon the simulation began with Naruto charging towards his clone with his energy restored to a level he needed to fight this situation properly. Kit, calm down, you're overworking your body too much to handle this level of battle. Kyuubi said while pumping his chakra into Naruto's body to keep his muscles from clenching as well as keeping his heart rate as stable as possible. He knew that with the adrenaline that was pumping through the boy's body would have his heart working triple time until it would give out and kill the boy before he would even realize it. I know that Q, but you saw what happened back there with Taiyo and with them still out there. I have to get better, I'm their leader remember. Naruto said out loud to Kyuubi, with the fox spirit merely sighing to himself already knowing the boy's stubbornness would refuse to give in to reason. You think I don't know that? I'm your ing partner remember. But tell me something, what will you lead if you're dead? Kyuubi said with Naruto pausing slightly before going through his attack that parried one of Kumori's clone's swords right before punching him in the face and jumping away from a large fireball while sending a downward slash to block another clone's swords. I'm not going to die, I got way too much to live for and I can't let my daughter become a bastard child in this world. I have to go through this. Naruto said before he closed his eyes, while Kyuubi growled in anger. You're so damn stubborn, fine then, meet me in the seal when you're finished. I'll heal you after you've died. Kyuubi said as he felt his vessel begin to concentrate and pull on some of his chakra, though only enough to keep his stamina and muscle mass intact. The blonde then opened his eyes and with an enraged-like look in his eyes, he roared like a beast and charged at the dark clone. As soon as he sent out the first swipe of his sword, more thoughts protruded through his mind and he soon let out a loud roar, which caused Kyuubi's chakra to erupt from his body but took on a different look than it usually would take. He then charged at the clones with focus on his mind and began to fight each one with a restored drive to win the battle. As he continued the hardcore training session, more thoughts went through his mind and caused him to remember the way his fight with Taiyo began. Flashback. Naruto and Taiyo each landed in a spot that was 200 yards away from the burning bandit camp, both fighters standing near a cliff with a deep gorge underneath it, though it did hold a beautiful view of a lake in the center of a forest with the moonlight shining over the surface. Naruto looked onto Taiyo with a calm demeanor, though his eyes were raging like a storm, anger and hatred appearing together, though if one were to look real deeply into his eyes they may catch another emotion crossing his eyes: regret. Seeing his once fellow student right now caused multiple memories to come up involving his master and the lessons they learned together, but at the same time all the fun they had with their sensei once the training ended. It looks like you have changed quite well with that title you stole. You eyes tell all of the things you've learned before master's death. Taiyo said with Naruto cracking his neck. Apparently so have you, but that's no longer a concern to be held. It's time we settle this old fight. Naruto said as he took several swipes in the air with his swords before bringing them down, the sword's tips touching the ground slightly. Yes it is, but I don't think you'll win this time. Taiyo said as began to swing his naginata in the air before slamming it on the ground, the top of the blade touching the ground while his hands tightly held onto the staff as if it were his lifeline. The two then stood face to face, both standing still for a moment before they charged at each other, with Naruto scraping his swords along the ground along with Taiyo doing the same with his naginata. Both warriors then appeared before each other with their gaze not separating from each other, Taiyo initiating the fight by swinging his naginata in an upward arc that Naruto hopped over while performing a backflip corkscrew, standing solely on his fight facing the back of Taiyo before charging at him with his swords held above his head. He then sent the double downward straight slash but was blocked by Taiyo, who quickly spun around on his heels to clash his blade with Naruto's, something that surprised the teen and gave the brown-haired man the slight advantage. He then connected a backhand to Naruto's cheek with his free arm, causing Naruto to lose his footing before receiving a big boot to the chest that lifted him off the ground and land on his back, thus causing a rush of air to come out. Taiyo then swung his naginata in his hand before holding it in a downward stabbing position and sent it towards the teen's stomach, but missed when Naruto rolled over to the right. He then placed his hands on the ground and pushed himself off the ground with enough strength that he was able to form a cannonball with his body. He then flipped himself around by one revolution before extending a double boot to Taiyo's chest, using him as a springboard to right himself and land perfectly on the ground. The moment his feet touched the ground he went right on the attack by sending a left slash at Taiyo in a reverse grip, which was dodged when the man backed up but then saw that it was followed by a buzzsaw kick aimed at his head. The ex-apprentice to Slayer scowled at that and blocked the kick with his left arm before he grabbed the teen's leg with his free right hand and chucked the teen away from him right before he went through several one-hand seals, wind release, black twister. He called out as he spun his naginata above his head before bringing the weapon down and swinging in a wide arc, the wind reacting to the weapon as it came full swing and allowed the wind to form a twister that flew at the blonde, who landed on his feet and quickly stabbed his swords onto the ground before blazing through his own set of seals. Lightning release. Web of shadows, Naruto called out as he slammed his hands together, thus causing lightning to shoot out of his hands and fly towards the tornado. The lightning connected with the tornado, causing a slight struggle between the two techniques before the wind distorted and allowed the lightning to fly towards Taiyo. The man only grinned before extending his weapon as the lightning neared him, but amazingly the lightning merely absorbed itself into the weapon before Taiyo began to spin the weapon around his body, the lightning coming off the blade. You going to have to do better than that if you want to kill me. Wind release, slipstream missile. He called out as he slid his naginata along the ground before suddenly picking up the weapon and sent another blast of wind at Naruto, though it was infused with the lightning from his previous jutsu. Oh, I intend to, Naruto said as he went through another set of seals and slamming his hands on the ground. Fire release barrier, Dome of the Almighty. Naruto called out as fire exploded out of the ground before forming a dome around his body. This caused Taiyo to snarl as his wind technique hit the blonde fire technique, thus causing the flames to explode in fierceness, but he then heard the blonde's voice again as he called out his next move, fire release, Inferno Blaze Palm. Taiyo then watched as the flames exploded again, but this time they were aimed for him, with the fire dome now shooting a blast of fire at him, which caused him to curse to himself before he went through several seals again. Wind release. Roar of the beast. Taiyo called out before he suddenly lurched forward and sent out a loud yell that took on the sound of a fierce creature ready to eat. The yell also sent out a massive wave of wind that caused the flames to fan out of existence, but Naruto was nowhere to be found. The brown-haired man looked confused for a moment before his eyes laid on a man-sized hole in the center of where the dome once sat. He then heard a loud crack behind him and quickly turned to send a wide slash with his naginata, but soon felt the left side of his face getting slashed and soon lost vision in his left eye. He then growled when he felt a stinging pain on his face as he hopped backwards to see Naruto above ground with the sword in his left hand leaking with blood, his blood mind you. Ignoring the intense pain for the moment, he sent a heavy right towards Naruto, who was just regained his foot and brought up the sword that had Taiyo's blood on it up to defend. It was then that the landscape of the fight would change, as the second his fist collided with the sword it brought in half, allowing Taiyo to land his punch onto the shocked face of Naruto. The blonde then skidded a few feet back along the ground before coming to a complete stop, allowing both warriors to catch their breath while examining the damages that was dealt to them. Taiyo then looked towards his naginata and saw that the blade on the weapon was gone, possibly removed during that brief close encounter that allowed Naruto to take away one of his eyes, something that caused the now one-eyed warrior to place a full-on devilish grin on face with his single eye glinting with glee at the prospect of what just happened. I can't believe it. You had to resort to such a dirty underhanded tactic as that just to take one eye from me. Not so very becoming of a warrior, isn't it? Oh well, at least I destroyed your weapons. He asked, still feeling the blood leak from his wound and dripped on his body and the ground. He then sent some of his chakra to the wound and molded it around not only the scar but his now lost eye as well, hoping that it would cause less of his blood to flow out of the wound before tossing the destroyed naginata over the gorge. That caused Naruto to growl as Taiyo did indeed manage to destroy both of his two prized swords, as Amaterasu was destroyed during the swing by cutting it cleanly through the center of the sword, thus telling him that he was lucky to come out of that swing with just a hip wound and one sword destroyed. These were once his favorite swords and were his first ever present from his sensei. Now they were just hilts of two broken swords that could never be replaced. It wasn't a coward's move, just a little something to ensure you that I will kill you, Naruto said while feeling Kyuubi heal the wound above his right hip, as that last attack from Taiyo did manage to get him, though luckily pain was excruciating but was ignorable to the blonde-haired shinobi. Let's say we kick things up a notch, Naruto asked as he removed his shirt and summoned Gunshin to his hand, taking a kenjutsu stance. Taiyo smirked again before doing the same thing as the blonde, showing the boy his battle scars and stitch lines going along his chest and abdomen. He then drew his sword Benahansho and took on his own sword stance. I thought you would never ask that question, Taiyo said before he rushed towards the blonde teen. End flashback. The fight between the blonde and his clones were now winding down, with the only ones now remaining were Kumori and his two shadow clones, both of which were proving that they were beyond that of shadow clones. Kumori then walked up to Naruto with his copy of Gunshin in hand and pointed it towards his creator. Are you done yet, Naruto? Your limits have been reached and the time limit is up. Do you still want to continue on fighting the three of us? He asked, with Naruto looking towards Kumori with a blank expression. Does Koyuki scream my name after an orgasm? Naruto asked back before charging towards his three opponents, intent on taking them out and completing the objective at hand. He needed to at least accomplish something that mattered. Meanwhile, with the group, We currently find the group of shinobi resting in an open field, each one allowing their bones to rest up so that the trip back to Konoha wouldn't take much out of them. The group all sat in a circle before a roaring fire that cooked the deer meat that they hunted for a while ago, and each one eagerly biting into the meat with starved expressions, though Guy could swear that he saw a little deer in the forest that gave him a look that screamed, "You killed my mother." Cookie time, where did that saying come from? Though I'm certain many of you won't get it. So I take it you guys had fun on this mission? Kurenai asked with a deep smirk as the others nodded their heads, liking the feeling they all gained after completing not only a tough mission but gaining something new in the process. I never thought I would enjoy as much as I enjoyed this one. At first it would a lot out of me to fight bandits, but now I can fight them as if they're fresh academy students. Tenten said, also enjoying the fact that her new technique brought new possibilities to her fighting. Yush, Naruto-kun sure did give us an excellent challenge for us to complete, but how did he come up with such a strategy as that? Guy asked while clenching his fist, telling the others that looked at him closely that his new move had a lot to do with taijutsu, but at the same time it didn't. I guess that's more of his history that we don't know yet, but I'm sure that he'll tell us when he's ready. Tenten said with the others nodding before she got an idea. Well, hey, how did everyone's fight go? I'm pretty sure that it was fun, especially with the new moves we got during the training time. Tenten said with everyone pondering at that before Kiba quickly jumped at that idea, appearing to be quite energetic at that as well. Well, my fight went well with Akamaru, we both dominated their candies. He said with his puppy barking in agreement. He then went on to explain their fight and the way it progressed, causing everyone to listen intently, especially Kurenai since he was her student. This teen made quite the progression over time, as while he still had that Inuzuka arrogance, it wasn't the same as it once was. He talked as if he no longer assumed that his opponents were weak and actually looked beyond the facade that was presented before him. After finishing his tale on his fight, Kurenai then asked him to demonstrate his new move. The dog boy then readily got up from his seated position and he ran towards a tree with Akamaru following closely, both standing before a tree. Kiba then got down low with his left hand touching the ground and his right hand held up in the air. The group of shinobi then saw Kiba's right hand become engulfed in fire before he charged towards the tree and sent a claw swipe towards it, calling out, "Fire release, soul-shattering iron claws," then watched in surprise when a deep gash appeared on the tree. Kiba then looked towards Akamaru, who nodded his head before digging his claws into the ground before letting loose a loud bark that caused the wind to distort and connect with the tree, thus causing the bark to fly off the tree. This is interesting. He's invented a technique that allows both himself and his dog to a variety of attacks. That's very interesting indeed, Guy said to Kurenai, who nodded her head while Kiba walked back to his seat with Puppy happily placed him on top of his head and wagging its tail. It was then that Shino got up from his seated position and explained how his fight went, though the bug users proclaimed that it didn't take him long to defeat his opponents as he used his bugs to kill off the majority of his opponents, but he did leave one alive long enough to perform his new technique. It was then that he held up his right hand and began to concentrate his chakra to his hand, thus causing purple bolts of electricity to appear out of his hand. Everyone then watched in amazement as Shino continued to gather chakra for his attack, with the sparks going large by the second until he suddenly brought his palm forward and called out his newest technique, Lightning Release, Thunder Hive Swarm. He called out as the electricity shot out of his hand in the form of 5 different lightning bolts that sailed in the air before converging on one target, nailing it dead center. The others looked on in shock at how well the blast was controlled and the level of impact that it could create. It also caused one to think, what else could he make to be that effective in battle? This is also very interesting. He utilized the uniqueness of his clan's mid to long-range fighting style with a short-range jutsu that can now allow all form of offensive fighting. That's quite an accomplishment, don't you think? Kurenai asked Guy while Shino sat back down on his seat. Wow, Shino-kun, it took you a week to make that? Hinata asked, still amazed at the bug user's newest technique. It's actually been an idea of mine from a long while ago, but I never had the time to make it until now. Shino said with Kiba smirking. Then that is indeed one hell of an accomplishment if you ask me. Kiba said with Shino nodding his head before once more going back into his silent mode, allowing his mind to work on another jutsu that he was sure would revolutionize his entire clan's fighting style. It was then that Hinata chose to stand up, not feeling the least bit shy about her standing up, but was feeling shy in explaining her fight to the others while the boy that captured her heart wasn't there to hear or see it. My fight also went well, though I did have quite a challenge with my opponents. Hinata said before going into explanation on her battle. Flashback. Hinata currently stood in a large circle of bandits with each one looking at her with an expression that said they wished to do terrible things to her once this was all said and done. Each bandit held a weapon in their own hands, with some of them slamming them into their palms like a teacher would with a wooden ruler. One bandit then stepped forward with brown hair and black eyes, stepped up with a wooden club in his hand and a smirk on his face. Hey sweetheart, I have a proposal for you that you better take heed of. You should know that regardless of what you try, we will kill you, so how's about you surrender yourself? You do that, then we'll kill quickly and painlessly after we have some fun, of course. He said, whiling his lips, which further disgusted the Hyuga heiress. To think that a man would be so sick into wanting to have with a child was just a flat-out abomination against God. However, if you chose not to surrender, then we will have no choose but to make your death extremely painful but still have some fun beforehand. Choose wisely, after all it's only fair that we allow you to choose how you die. The man said with Hinata simply going into a new stance and activating her Byakugan. How's this for an option? She said as she began to envision the 8 divinations around her. How's about I kill all of you without so much as breaking a sweat? Hinata said with the men looking slightly amazed at her fire before each one laughed to themselves and made explicit remarks to the girl, even going as far as to say what they were going to do to her. Okay then sweetheart, if you want it that way. Men, go on ahead and claim the prize, but I get first dibs. The man said with the others nodding before they charged at the white-eyed girl, who stayed in her stance with her eyes closed before opening them with a fierceness that promised ungodly amounts of pain to any would-be victim that pissed her off. Those victims would currently serve in place of these idiots. Protection of the 8 trigrams, 64 palms. She said as she began to use her new move, with her arms moving at such high speeds that it would appear as if they vanished in the air as he moved them. The white-eyed girl then suddenly ended the technique and then slowly walked towards the only man that didn't join his friend's ambush, who was looking at the girl in surprise before it turned to sheer horror. At that very second, the bandits all screamed in pain before blood shot out of their bodies along with limbs beginning to fall off. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This girl had managed to kill 17 men out of the 20 in his group with such an ease that it almost seemed as if she was demon. Ho, how did youdd do t to that? The man stuttered out with Hinata only looking at him with a blank expression, while the other 2 near him that survived the encounter were beginning to back up in fear. I'm a Hyuga clan member, something that you failed to see. Hinata said before going through a set of seals before aiming her palm towards the 1 survivors of the encounter. 8 trigrams water release, hydro divination whirl. She called out as she performed her clan's signature technique, beginning to spin, but as she spun something strange occurred. Instead of seeing chakra appear, the 3 bandits saw water swirling around the barrier with sharp edges appearing as well. The white-eyed girl then suddenly stopped her spin, which caused the water to expand it and nailed the 3 bandits dead on. After the water went by them, the 3 bandits would only look on in shock before their bodies fell apart, showing that they were cut cleanly by a blade of some type before they could even feel it. After seeing what was left of the men fall over onto the ground in dead heaps, she then fled the area to search for her teammates, a smile coming to her face at accomplishing something that she worked hard to perfect. End flashback. After telling them of her fight and showing off her new technique, the group quickly became flabbergasted at the knowledge that they received. Well, all except Kurenai, who had a big smirk on her face at finally seeing the girl she looked at like a younger sister break out of that cocoon. Tenten then stepped up next and began to discuss her fight involving the bandits, while using the weapon that Naruto gave her a while ago. She stated that her fight was a lot of fun, as while the bandits pissed her off with threats that they were going to rape her before killing her, she wouldn't allow that to stop her fun. Flashback. Tenten stood before a small gang of bandits, about 10 to 15 in total, with each one holding a blunt object in hand with some just going bare knuckle. Each bandit had a sly grin on their faces and an evil glint within their eyes as some were shouting ill intentions towards her, such as rape and other types of actions that would make her quell in disgust. Even though she knew that this was to be expected from men to whom they could do whatever they wanted, thanks to Naruto, it still disgusted her that they would even think that. If anyone was going to have her, it was going to be that blonde boy. It was then that the girl pulled out a scroll and unleashed it, allowing her weapon to appear within her hand for all to see. The sword looked like a standard double-sided sword that was pure white on the edges with a red center that went from the tip all the way down to the guard below. The guard of the sword was a simple U-shaped guard, which was pure white as well with a red rose in the center of the guard. The handle was wrapped with red tape with an easy grip around it to allow easy slashes and stabs. This was the weapon that was given to her by Naruto not very long ago and was so happy to now being able to use this in battle, and thankfully she had willing test subjects to use the weapon on. Aw, would you look at this, Sweetie thinks that she can use a sword against us. Boys, how's about we show her how one really uses a weapon? One of the bandits said with the others agreeing, but it soon stopped when the same man that made that statement suddenly lost the top of his skull, shocking the others. They then looked to see Tenten with her arm raised in the air and twirling something her hand before she grabbed the handle and sent a wide swipe towards the group of bandits, and this time she removed the heads of 3 bandits in one stroke. They all then looked on in shock when girl suddenly brought her arm to the side and saw that the weapon in her hand was the handle of her sword. They then saw segments begin to build on the sword's handle until it once more made up the blade that they saw before. So tell me, was that good enough for you guys? Tenten asked with a sly smile on her face, thus causing the men to take a dump in their pants after seeing how easily the girl defeated their friends. Wah 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 is the thin thing? One of the bandits asked with Tenten starting to get an off look on her face. You know what? I never did come up with a name for it, but to answer your question, this sword is a simply chain sword. It's a fun weapon that allows me to fight in both short range and long range, and all with just a little bit of my chakra. She said as she pumped some chakra into the sword, thus allowing the bandits to see the segments of the sword separate and turn into a whip-like weapon. However, its uses go even further than that. It also allows me to use some of my elemental chakra as well. Tenten said before the chain sword became engulfed in flames, thus startling the bandits and even causing some to backpedal. What are you? The bandit asked with Tenten begin to twirl the flaming chain sword in the air before she spoke. I'm just a kunoichi that's going to kill you is all. Tenten said before she connected the sword and sent a wide-angle arc towards the men calling out, fire release, Falcon Alt Jutsu. She called out. As soon as she did, the fire flew off the sword in its wide arc and shot towards the enemy, taking on the shape of fire falcons. The men didn't even have a chance to scream, as the fire birds tore through them all without mercy and caused their bodies to burn from the intense heat. As soon as the bun-haired girl saw that the bandits were now charred sacks of flesh, she then charged deeper into the camp and hoped to find her teammates. End flashback. Lee then stood up with as much eagerness to speak as the others, though he pulled up Neji at the same time, much to the white-eyed boy's chagrin, but he chose not to say anything. He then went on to explain that both he and Neji fought the same 2 individuals that originally attacked their group before the battle started in the camp. Lee then stated that while they were indeed strong opponents, they were still no match for him or Neji. Especially when they dished out the new techs on theirs, as Lee so eloquently put it, much to Guy's dismay at how far his prodigy fell from the flames of youth that he would use such language. He then went on to explain that both he and Neji fought two of the shinobi that attacked them at the start of the mission. The boys then talked about their own individual fight against their opponents and how easily they won against them. It was then that Lee and Neji demonstrated their new moves, thus causing everyone to look on with curiosity etched all over their faces. After all, these were two of the three strongest genin in the village. Okay, my technique gave me little bit of hard time, but after getting used to it and functions I finally completed it. Neji said before he took in his Jiyuken stance and activated his Byakugan. He took in a deep breath and focused his chakra solely around his palm behind his back, which began to glow a bright blue and crackle with electricity. He then sent his palms forward and gave a loud shout of, lightning release, 8 trigrams, empty palm, laser circus. He called out as his hand shot the blast of chakra from his hand, but hand blast of lightning circling around the blast. The group watched with wide eyes as the blast impacted another tree and destroyed the trunk of the tree, causing the whole thing to fall over and hit the ground hard. Neji then turned to face the group behind him who were currently looking on with slack jaws along with Hinata, seeing as how she too created an elementalized version of their clan techniques. That main use for my technique is to not only add in its lethal striking range but also add its offensive capabilities. Neji said with everyone clapping their hands before watching Lee step up. They then saw Lee step into a new stance with his eyes closed, showing everyone his full-on concentration for this new move. They then saw him snap his eyes open before charging towards the tree truck and sent a strong right kick onto the tree's body, causing the tree to buckle under the pressure of his kick before cracking in half, yet Lee wasn't done yet. He then began to blaze through punches and kicks onto the tree that went so fast that it looked as if Lee was using chakra blades. He then sent one final punch onto the tree before he vanished and reappeared beside Neji. Everyone was about to ask what he just did before they looked at the tree and saw it burst into pieces where fire surrounding the burning wood. That was just a simple test of a new style I'm making, and no, I can't tell you yet, it's a surprise. Lee said with Neji looking on in disbelief and was now kicking himself for deactivating his Byakugan before Lee went up. The boys then sat down with everyone looking at the two boys in amazement while Kurenai and Guy sat with proud smirks on their faces. Well now, I can certainly say that was quite an impressive showing with your jutsu creativity. Naruto would be quite proud of you all if he were here right now. Kurenai said with the genin nodding before Kiba spoke up. Hey sensei, what new move did you make? Kiba asked with everyone else nodding in agreement to that question. Yeah, I mean it's not fair that we have to reveal our new moves and you guys don't. Tenten said with Guy and Kurenai looking towards each other before they nodded their heads. Very well then, but it must remain a secret between us all. Guy said with everyone nodding their heads. Sorry, but their moves have to stay a secret for now. They'll be revealed when it's time for it. Back to Naruto. Naruto continued to fight the battle with much ferocity and drive as one could imagine, though the amount of fatigue his body currently held was beyond one's belief. His body was just a mesh of pinched nerves, pulled muscles, and fractured bones, yet he was still willing to continue on with the exercise. He wasn't one to allow failure to plague his person and knew that it would desecrate the memory of his sensei if he did. As such, he fought hard on through the fight and managed to take out 2 of the clones. He still had about 8 more to deal with and the jutsus were still raining down on his area. Damn it, I'm still not there. What the hell is wrong with me? Naruto shouted as he parried the strike of one clone before sending a quick right to another clone, which connected hard and caused the clone to lose balance. Seeing the small opening, the blonde placed his sword in a reverse grip and took a quick upward slash towards the clone, watching as his blade sliced across its chest and causing the technique to end, thus leaving him with only 7 clones to deal with. Master, do you still want to keep going? You see that you're almost dead out of chakra right now and your stamina is almost dried up. What could you possibly do in this situation? Kumori asked with Naruto standing up while grabbing his chest before he gazed towards his clone and simply let out a loud cough before he spoke. I do have something that I can do. My ace in the hole. Naruto said before he said the word to activate the technique that he used during his fight with Taiyo. The technique that gave him his name. Flashback.